Let's first call the roll. Board Member Johnson.
Present.
Board Member McClintock.
Present.
Board Member Reamer.
Here.
And Board Member Rychecki.
Present.
Chair Spencer, Vice Chair Jenna, and Board Member Primo are absent, but we do have a quorum. Any nominations for temporary chair for tonight's meeting only?
I nominate Jack Rychecki.
Okay, any other nominations? Let's go ahead and vote then. May I please have a motion to elect him as chair?
I move we elect Jack Rychecki as temporary chair for the August 17th Board of Adjustments meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
We got it done.
All right, let's go ahead and vote using, we won't use that, we'll do a roll call. Board Member McClintock.
Aye.
Board Member Reamer.
Aye.
Board Member Johnson.
Aye.
And Board Member Rychecki.
Aye.
All right, congratulations, you're our chair for the night. Let's go ahead and move you over and then we'll continue the meeting.
Our first order of business is the approval of the agenda. The agenda consists of minutes to be approved, any public comment that's not related to the public hearing that follows later, any general business we have, the public hearing, and any comments and reports we have from staff or chair members. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let's vote.
It's unanimous and the motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is that to approve the minutes of our May 18th meeting. Are there any comments about the minutes?
No comments, but I move to approve based on the recording secretary's certification, the May 18th, 2017 action minutes for the May 18th, 2017 regular meeting of the Littleton Board of Adjustment.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, let's vote.
All right, it's unanimous and the motion carries.
Next order of business is any public comment related for general business or non-agenda related items. Seeing no member of the public here, we will dispense with that part of the agenda. Same with general business. I don't believe there's anything left over from last meeting. So we shall now proceed to the public hearing. It is ID number 17-246, case number VAR 17-0007, variance to the maximum size of a sign in the R2 zone district for Horizon Christian Fellowship at 5470 South Lowell Boulevard. I think first we hear from staff.
Yes, you do. Pam Hall here for the City Littleton Planning. So we are looking at the case tonight of variance VAR 17-0007, variance to the maximum size of a sign in the R2 zone district for Horizon Christian Fellowship at 5470 South Lowell Boulevard. Do we have? There we go. So a little bit of background. Horizon Christian Fellowship was purchased, the subject property, on June 21st, 2013. The building was constructed back in 1960 and has been the home of numerous churches and schools. Churches are permitted uses in the R2 zone district single family, but they must comply with the underlying zone district's requirements as well as other zoning requirements such as signage. The maximum allowable signage in an R2 zone district is 3 square feet. The sign area is specific to residential uses within the zone district. Institutional uses, such as churches or schools, have been granted additional signage due to the nature of their use. For example, St. James Presbyterian Church that's up on Bellevue and Lowell is also in the R2 zone district. They've been allowed approximately 40 square feet of a ground sign, which is externally illuminated. The applicant is requesting an additional 29 square feet for a total of 32 square foot of signage. The applicant intends that this wall-mounted sign be internally illuminated. Here's a graphic of the rendering of the proposed sign on the west elevation of the church. It is approximately 30 feet from the west property line along Lowell, and the internal illumination was calculated at 0.104 foot candles. And just for reference, the maximum allowed at property line is 0.10, so it's just a little bit more than what our lighting code would allow for, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So City Code Section 4-3-2-3D determines the maximum amount of signage permitted in the single-family zone district, and the maximum, as I said earlier, is 3 square feet. 4-3-4-4 talks about variances in the case and when to allow for the sign code, and it states that in each case, a request for variance is not allowed unless it specifically finds that each and every one of the following conditions exist. So the first criterion A in the sign variance, is that there are special circumstances or conditions such as the existence of buildings, topography, vegetation, sign structures, or other matters on adjacent lots or within the adjacent public right-of-way, which would substantially restrict the effectiveness of a sign in question, provided, however, such special circumstances or conditions must be peculiar to the particular business or enterprise to which the applicant desires to draw attention, and does not apply to in general to all businesses or enterprises in the area. So as previously stated, the maximum size in the residential districts are 3 square feet. Staff went around and we did a visual assessment of existing signs throughout Littleton in single-family residential neighborhoods. Since the sign code has become content neutral as of last year, which means that you can't read the content of the sign, we can end up and regulate square footage, location, amount of signs, and such. I just went ahead and did an assessment for all signs in the single-family area and not just churches. Most of the signs that were observed were ground signs, and they're externally lit and considerably larger than 3 square feet. If the subject property were a commercial district, we would calculate it by looking at the linear frontage of the lot. And since they're on a corner property, we would count the 2 contiguous areas. So they would be allowed 300 square feet if they were in a business district. The applicant's requesting the 32 square feet seems to be consistent with existing signs in the single-family district, so this criterion appears to be met. Criterion B. The variance would be in general harmony with the purpose of this chapter and specifically would be not injurious to the neighborhood in which the business or enterprise which the applicant desires to draw attention is located. The proposed sign appears to be in general harmony, the size of the sign, with the sign code regarding the size. However, 4-3-2-3F of the sign code prohibits internal illumination of signs in single-family residential. The visual assessment that staff conducted that I spoke about on the last criterion found that there were no internally lit wall signs and most of the ground signs were externally lit. So an internally illuminated wall sign could have a negative impact on the adjacent residential properties. Therefore, staff does not recommend that the sign be lit internally, but by an external light source. And then the third criterion C, is that the variance is the minimum one necessary to permit the applicant to reasonably draw attention to his business or enterprise. So the sign code allows every business to display up to 3 signs and at least 32 square foot of signage. The applicant is requesting 1 sign that is 32 square feet, so this criterion appears to be met. Now, you were all given a copy of the one comment that we received. There was a lady that could not attend tonight, and she is actually in favor. Should I go ahead and read it? Should I read this? Okay. So this was actually addressed to Mr. Bill Hopping, which is a council member, but she says, "My husband Terry and I have planned to attend the public hearing on a requested variance to allow a large lighted sign on the church at 5470 South Lowell Boulevard. They're asking for 33, which is actually incorrect. It's 32 square foot, far larger than the 3 square foot limit in an R2 zone district, and it's lighted internally. Unfortunately, her husband is not well, so we will not be there to voice our support for the approval of the sign. We live at 5475 South Lowell, which is directly across the street. The church has improved the property and are good neighbors, and the sign is discreet and much better than the banner that they've been hanging out. Vote yes, Dottie Biggs." So the staff recommendation, we recommend approval for a variance of an additional 29 square feet to allow for a maximum of 32 square foot of signage. However, staff would recommend that the sign be lit by an external source and not internally lit as originally requested by the applicant. So does the board have any questions of staff at this time?
I guess I do.
Okay.
Okay. Sign code was approved last year. Am I correct on that? Because I think you stated that.
Correct.
So when you mentioned St. James as an example, that was not done under the current sign code.
Correct.
The hodgepodge that you saw in R2 districts with church signs all predates this.
Correct.
And so you found monument signs that were externally illuminated, monument signs that were internally illuminated, but generally you found wall-mounted signs not illuminated. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm thinking about, as I travel around town and look at churches and what they have in terms of signage. Mm-hmm. Okay. And you clarified what I wanted to know because I couldn't read the picture. It is 0.104 foot candles are lumens at
Correct.
that site.
At the property line, yes.
Okay. And the traffic count along Lowell?
It's a couple of years old. I got it from the traffic transportation engineer. It was done in 2014, and between Bowles and Bellevue was 11,054 per 24-hour basis, and you can basically split that in half approximately because it's both directions is what it counted. So 11,000 per 24 hours.
It's a pretty busy street.
It's a pretty busy street, and there's a lot of illuminated street lights along it as well.
Especially at the corner, and it's probably brighter than 0.104 lumens.
Probably so, but we don't count that as part of the lighting
Yeah,
code.
I understand. Okay. Any other questions?
A question on the foot candles and the external lighted concept. Is the notion that the externally lighted would be, the light source would be facing away from the street as opposed to the light illuminating out from the sign towards the street? Is that the?
Correct. It could be done one of two ways on a wall sign. It could be lit up above and washed down over the sign, or it could be lit from the ground and no more than a 45-degree angle, but it would be actually posted away from the property and towards the building itself.
Thank you.
I have a question. Can it be suspended under the eaves?
It could as well.
Or is it-
Yes.
No more questions? Thank you, Ms. Hall.
Okay, so if you have no more questions as staff, I will now call Ian Frazier up. He's a representative for Horizon Christian Fellowship.
Mr. Frazier,
Good evening.
please give us your presentation.
Do we need name, address for the
I'm
record?
thank you very much for point of order. Please state your name and address.
It's Ian Frazier. The address is 4000 South Cherokee Street, Inglewood, Colorado, 80110. I don't have a lot to add relative to what Pam has already presented to you guys. We are a church. Our intention with the sign is obviously to identify ourselves as a church. And not so much in the sense of self-promotion as much as it would serve the community to know that we are a church. It's a little bit funny to hear how many people don't know that we're actually a church because we don't have a sign. We have hung out a former entrance rug that had our logo on it during services to identify ourselves. So we'd like to think that we could improve upon that. But that essentially summarizes why we want a sign. I guess I would question a little bit about the staff's recommendations regarding the internal illumination versus the external illumination. I mean, if the goal is to reduce the amount of light that exits the property, if you will, our intention was to backlight the sign. So in essence, it does the same thing. The light is directed towards the building, but it would be lit with LEDs, as opposed to some sort of an incandescent light source or a fluorescent light source, and can be adjusted, on a time clock if it was required. So I guess I just wanted a little bit of clarification on that. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
Are there any questions?
I have a question. The two lights that are out in front right now, are they alarm lights or security lights, or are they your standard floodlight?
They're floodlights, and formerly they lit the address placard that was on the front of the building.
Okay, would those go away if it was internal?
Yes.
Or if it's required to be external, you could convert them to externals?
Well, yeah, what we would probably do would be to do it on the ground in front of the sign, as Pam mentioned.
As far as internal illumination, what type of letters, you want the letters to be illuminated or the background behind the letters to be illuminated?
Well, so specifically, the LED, the diodes would attach to the back of the sign. So they would cast the light onto the building, creating sort of a halo effect, if you would, around the sign. So the sign itself would technically not be illuminated. It would just be the back of the sign that's illuminated. Does that make sense? I don't know
Yes,
if
I understand what,
Yeah.
their letters raised off the wall.
Right, they would they would sit on standoffs, and they would probably be constructed of some sort of a treated metal.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Frazier.
Thank you.
Seeing no members of the public here to give testimony, we shall not have any public testimony except for the one email that we received from Mrs. Biggs. All right. before we go into discussion, we need a motion. Anybody willing to make a motion one way or the other?
Motion to discuss it.
A motion to discuss it. Okay, do I have a second? No, well, we'll just go ahead straight to discussion then, if you want to discuss it before we have a motion. What would you like to say, Mr. Johnson?
Well,
I'm sorry, Chair. You actually need to bring a motion before you can discuss it. And just understand you're not set on voting
Yeah,
the way that the motion goes. You just need to have one on the floor in order to
Thank
speak
you.
about it.
that's what I thought Robert's Rule of Order had. However, we'll take that under advisement. So do I have a motion one way or the other on this issue? Now, I can't make the motion, so one of you three has to. Otherwise, if you do not want to make a motion, I will entertain one asking to table the issue.
I move to approve case VAR 17-0007, request for variance for additional 29 square feet of signage to allow 32 square feet wall sign for Horizon Christian Fellowship at 5470 South Lowell Boulevard, based on the facts that the request does meet all the criteria of section 4-3-4-4 of the Littleton City Sign Code. Approval of this application is based on the following findings of facts. There are special circumstances that exist which restrict the effectiveness of the sign in question. And 2, the request would be in general harmony with the sign code and specifically not be injurious to the neighborhood. 3, the variance is the minimum one necessary to permit the applicant to reasonably draw attention to his business or enterprise.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, now we can have discussion. Mr. Johnson?
I'm trying to get a picture of what it would look like backlit. Do you have colorations? One question is, do you have a coloration in mind? That's all I want to know.
Hold it, we have to reopen the public hearing.
Okay, open, sorry. Should have thought of it then.
Now, it's my understanding LED lights can be any color you want, just have to change the frequency.
Yeah.
And the code is pretty neutral on what the content is or what the color is. My understanding. Any more discussion?
Jack, did you make a note how close they were on the foot candles? I know there's that foot candles point.
Point 104 was on the drawing, and that is, and most residential setbacks are 25 feet. This is 30 feet, so it's slightly over at 30 feet, so you know it's going to be slightly over at 25 feet. Because it's based on the square that the
It is on an illuminated street, so there would be some light saturation anyways occurring.
I guess this is my observation. Do a lot of walking in town, and I look at churches. And
You guys just make sure you're speaking into the microphone.
Okay.
It's even hard for us to hear you, so
Okay.
just make sure you're doing that. Thanks.
And as I walk around the churches, they generally have wall-mounted signs unlit. And, I mean, they're big signs. You can go to Ascension Lutheran Church. It's a huge sign. And then there are other churches that have very small signs on their walls. A lot of them depend on monument signs out front.
Chair, I would just say, because the sign code is content neutral, I would caution you away from discussing the fact that there are church signs and just look at signs in
Okay,
general.
Well, I understand the caution. However, if we will be setting a precedence here if we allow a backlit sign. We will not?
No, the BOA decisions are not precedent setting.
Okay. Thank you for that. So the question is, are you in favor of it or not?
I would be in favor of the backlit, I think. I would have no problem with that. Being a busy street and being street lights and illuminated and 30 feet off of the sidewalk.
So you're saying that there are special circumstances because of the street lighting is pretty bright in that area because it's halogen lighting. And we have no complaints from people across the
Questioning
street.
the distance, the neighbor's statement. I would be in
Okay.
favor of the backlit.
I would be in favor of the backlit as well. I also appreciate that the light is not facing the street as to cause a distraction to oncoming drivers, so it'll be much more of a indirect lighting. I think that's a big factor to me in this, for this lighting design.
Same way. I'm in favor of the backlit. Because looking at the picture, if it was front lit from a floodlight on the ground, you've got a long distance to project that light all over the wall, no matter what color it is. This would make the coloring and the lighting more condensed behind the sign, not flood out the whole area with light.
Well, I have the opposite opinion, and it's because I think staff has analyzed this situation much more closely, and I tend to agree with staff that the sign should be externally lit. So,
Are you, as in the whole wall would be lit? Lit from either, I guess we talked about from above or 45-degree angle?
Yes.
Lighting up the whole wall, as opposed to lighting the letters on the
yes.
side?
And they need about typically 10 to 15-foot candles to light that up so it can be seen from the street. But it's lit there, and then it bounces off because it's a medium background. But that's my opinion. Any more discussion?
No.
Hearing none, let's go to a vote.
Can we clarify the motion? We were not sure that you mentioned either externally lit or
No, I
not.
didn't mention externally lit. I didn't mention externally.
So you need to, so you're saying the motion then was for internally lit?
Yes.
Okay, just to clarify.
So I didn't
understood it.
specify that we're going to,
So what we are voting for is to allow the extra area of the sign, and the letters themselves will be backlit. And a vote in favor of it will allow that as requested by the applicant. A vote not in favor of it will not allow the sign at all, unless we have another motion. Okay, please vote.
The vote is 3-1, and the motion carries.
Congratulations, sir. You can go proceed with the sign, with your application. Now I have to find my agenda here. Okay, are there any comments from staff or the development director?
No comments?
Okay. Any comments from any of the members?
no, thank you.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Okay, vote on it. Meeting's adjourned.
All right, motion carries, and you can get out of here.